Good morning. It's Friday and we haven't finished the book yet, but we're really close. So I'm going to read 3 chapters today, and actually next week I'm in school. So I'm going to read the last few chapters in school next week. So chapter 21, Ants in Pants. Stella's thinking was simple. The girl now had to fight to force this evil woman out of her home. Forever. Alberta had killed her mother and father. Now she would stop at nothing to force Stella to sign over Saxby Hall to her, even resorting to torture. Together in the attic, she and Soot began dreaming up the most diabolical tricks they could play on Alberta. They needed tricks that were sure to make the girl's aunt scurry away from Saxby Hall, screaming for mercy. Stella found it hard to think of anything at first. She'd had such a sheltered upbringing, growing up in a vast country house and educated at a posh school for girls. Let's hide one of each of her pairs of socks. Then, when she puts them on in the morning, they will be odd, she exclaimed. Soot pulled a face. The boy had never even owned a pair of socks, so the idea of torturing Alberta by making her wear odd ones sounded lame. With respect, my lady, that is a load of tosh. Stella was more than a little offended. Well, I would like to hear your suggestions. Soot thought for a moment. Having grown up in a workhouse, he had learned you had to be tough just to survive. He had seen the boys play the meanest tricks on each other in the years he spent there. We need to put ants in her pants. Ants in her pants? Asked the girl. Yep, and that's just for starters. For a moment, Stella looked shocked. But then her face lit up at the thought. Soon she was trying to top Soot's idea. Flood her floor with marbles. The ghost went further still. Make a pipe go boom. In just a few minutes, they had thought of a long list of tricks. Put a nest of ants from the garden in her knicker drawer. Flood her carpet with marbles. There was a huge box for them in the nursery. Take all the tobacco out of her pipe and substitute it with gunpowder from a shotgun cartridge found in the drawer of Papa's desk in his study. Mix the bubbliest bubble bath from Mama's bathroom in with the woman's toothpaste. Cut open her bar of soap and put black boot polish from the kitchen inside. Go to the garage to find a shard of glass from the Rolls-Royce's cracked windscreen, then place it in her toilet bowl so when she pees, it sprays right back up at her. The pair were so enthused dreaming up the list, they could have added to it until dawn. However, there was no time to lose, and they immediately set to work putting their plans into action. As they could hear Aunt Alberta snoring downstairs in her bedroom, they knew they were safe for at least a little while. The tiny fireplace in the attic would be their escape route. It was quite a squeeze, but once inside they could use all of Saxby Hall's vast network of chimneys and chutes. Together, they would have the full run of the house. So Stella followed Soot into the attic chimney, just managing to squeeze her body inside. All through the night, they climbed up and down the vast network of tunnels and chutes, gathering all the props they needed to play tricks on their nasty auntie. On the nasty auntie. Just as the two were spreading marbles onto the carpet in Alberta's room as she slept, her beloved owl tucked up in her bed next to her, Stella noticed something. The curtains were beginning to glow with the sun behind them. Dawn was breaking. The pair quickly disappeared into the fireplace in Alberta's room and climbed back up the attic. Once there, Soot tied Stella back to the owl rack so Aunt Alberta would be fooled into thinking her niece hadn't moved all night. Downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 6 o'clock, waking Aunt Alberta up. Bong, 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 bong. The fun was about to begin. Chapter 23. My bottom, my bottom. Aunt Alberta sat up in bed. She gave Wagner, who was wearing matching striped pyjamas, a poke. It was time for her to give the owl rack another almighty turn and get back to the important business of torturing her niece. First, Alberta went to stand up, but instead of her feet touching the carpet as they did every morning, she placed them on a sea of marbles. The little glass balls rolled under her weight, and with a giant whoosh, Alberta flew into the air and landed on her behind with a crash. Ow! She screamed. The woman picked up a handful of marbles. How the blazes did these get here? Again and again, Alberta tried to stand up, but every time she did, she fell back down again. The hundreds of little glass balls made her roll every which way. So on her hands and knees, she crawled to the bathroom and pulled herself onto the toilet. Immediately, there was a feeling of immense relief. This lasted less than a second though, as she felt her wee-wee spurting back up at her. Ooh. Her behind soaking wet, and with her pyjama bottom still around her ankles, she jumped up from the toilet shouting, "No!" After taking a deep breath to gather herself, Alberta peered down into the toilet. Try as she might, she couldn't see anything amiss. The piece of glass the pair had put there had been perfectly positioned on top of the water so as not to arouse the slightest suspicion. So she sat down and tried again. "No!" she screamed, as her wee-wee came back to haunt her once more. She desperately needed to pee, but abandoning the toilet for now, the woman moved over to the sink to have a wash instead. She ran the taps and wetted her bar of soap under the water. Next, Alberta closed her eyes and rubbed the soap onto her face, giving herself what she thought was a jolly good wash. However, a shock was awaiting her. When she opened her eyes and looked in the mirror, she saw what she thought was a stranger looking back at her. In fact, it was her own face, but painted completely black. "No!" she cried in horror. Try as she might to wash it off by using more of the soap, it just became worse and worse. Now her hands and neck were completely black too. Alberta put the tip of the soap into her mouth to taste it. "It's boot polish." In the mirror, she inspected her now black tongue. Desperate to brush it clean, she reached for her toothbrush and toothpaste. Alberta squeezed what she assumed was nothing more than her favourite minty fresh toothpaste onto her brush. Now, of course, she was becoming suspicious. Just as she was about to put it in her mouth, she sniffed it. The paste smelled minty, so she began to brush away at her black tongue. But as soon as she began brushing, the bubble bath soot and Stella had mixed in with the paste began to foam. Huge soapy bubbles started foaming out of her mouth. The more furiously she brushed, the bigger the bubbles, and soon the bathroom was filled with them. "There is devilment at work here," she hollered. Upstairs in the attic, Stella and Soot listened to each new yelp from the woman. Every one made them laugh more and more. Back in her bedroom, Alberta threw a blanket over the marbles so she could walk to her chest of drawers. Determined to get to the bottom of this, she rushed to get dressed. First, she slipped on a pair of her massive knickers, as big as a child's tent. As soon as she had them on, she noticed a peculiar tingling sensation. The tingling became worse and worse, until it felt like her bottom was on fire. "My bottom! My bottom!" she howled, as she began leaping up and down and moving wildly around the bedroom. It was as if she was doing some ludicrous new dance routine, all of her own invention. Wagner was now sat up in bed and watching the display. The owl had seen his mistress do some bizarre things in his time, but this was off the scale. The ants in her pants were working like magic. The woman jerked and juddered her way over to her armchair and reached for her pipe. Her tobacco never failed to make everything seem better for her. Aunt Alberta placed the pipe to her mouth before guiding a lit match to the tobacco chamber. Except there wasn't any tobacco in there. It was gunpowder, Kaboom! Chapter 23. A game of cat and mouse. It would be something of an understatement to say the woman wasn't very happy. Aunt Alberta was furious. With the boot polish on her face, bubbles foaming at her mouth, her red hair singed from the explosion and ants wriggling around her knickers, she charged upstairs to the attic. Alberta knew her niece must somehow be responsible. She burst through the door in an attempt to capture the girl red-handed. However, much to her surprise, Stella was exactly as Alberta had left her, fastened to the owl rack. On seeing her aunt's startling appearance, half-dressed, jerking around wildly, the girl couldn't help but giggle.
"Oh, this is funny, is it?"
asked Alberta, not expecting an answer. "No, it's not," replied the girl. "More hilarious." With that, Stella hooted with uncontrollable laughter.
"Well, maybe you'll find this hilarious,"
said the woman as she twisted the handle on the rack again and again and again.
"Ah!"
The girl screamed.
"I don't see you laughing now."
"No," said the girl through the pain, "but it is still funny." A fuming Alberta turned the handle again, and Stella's arms and legs were yanked apart. Sadly, the tricks hadn't worked. Alberta hadn't fled from Saxby Hall screaming. Instead, she was now on the warpath.
"I know all those tricks were you, but how did you do it, child? I tied you to the rack myself, and the door was locked from the outside. There was no escape."
"I don't know what you're talking about," protested the girl.
"You know exactly what I am talking about,"
purred Aunt Alberta. She leaned over to her niece's face and looked deep into her eyes.
"I know you are lying."
The woman paced around the attic, looking for clues. First, she peered out of the tiny window to see if anyone was dangling from the snowy ledge by their fingertips. Next, she tiptoed over to the huge oak cupboard that stood in the corner of the room. In the blink of an eye, she pulled open the door and was bitterly disappointed not to find anyone hiding inside. Alberta stole a glance back at her niece. Without thinking, Stella looked over to the fireplace. No, she had given herself away again. This was where Soot was standing, observing the game of cat and mouse.
"So," hissed the woman, "I was right. There is a clue in the chimney."
"I don't know what you mean," uttered the girl.
"You are a very bad liar, child."
"No, I am not," protested Stella, before suddenly becoming mightily confused as to whether it was good to deny being a bad liar. That meant you were a good liar.
"Yesterday you looked over to the fireplace in the kitchen," continued Alberta. "There's a clue to all this up there, I know it."
The woman slunk over to the fireplace. Invisible to her, Soot stepped out of the way. As she got down on her hands and knees to look up the chimney, the ghost came up with a plan. Soot rushed over to the cupboard. He squeezed behind it and with all his strength started pushing it towards Aunt Alberta. As the wooden feet of the wardrobe squeaked on the floorboards, the woman looked up, but it was too late. Soot toppled the cupboard over her, and with a huge thump as it hit the floor, it trapped her inside.
"Let me out! Let me out of here at once!"
came an enraged voice from inside. "Top work, Soot!" exclaimed the girl. "Thank you, my lady. Now get me out of this thing." As the cupboard twitched on the floor with Aunt Alberta flailing around beneath it, the ghost untied Stella's hands and feet from the owl rack.
"Wagner! Wagner!"
bellowed the woman as the pair fled down the stairs. Just as they reached the next stairwell, they ducked, and the giant owl skimmed their heads on his way up to the attic. As they reached the landing, Stella nearly ran slap bang into Gibbon. The butler was shaking hands with the pot plant and saying,
"Do come and stay again, Major."
"So where now, my lady?" asked Soot. The garage, replied the girl.
I have an idea,